There are many sources proving that there was ancient Singapore history in the 13th to 14th century. This is a report proving that there were indeed settlements in the 13th to 14th century in Singapore. The 14th century Javanese chronicle, the Nagarakretagama, noted a settlement on Singapore Island, calling it Temasek. It was a trading settlement that began to form in Singapore in the late 13th century and grew of importance in the 14th century. The town, as it most likely existed then, was small and populated by seafaring Malays who made a living from fishing or trading. Since it was a trading port for fishermen, the fishermen could have lived there out of convenience and to earn a livelihood, thus establishing settlements. It is also on record that Chinese writers of the 14th century knew of a place they called Dragon Tooth Strait in Singapore. It is on record that the Yuan dynasty of China sent envoys to this place in 1320 to obtain tamed elephants, that the people of the Dragon Tooth Strait sent a tribute and trade mission to the Yuan court in 1325, further suggesting that there were people living and working in Singapore during this period. Another piece of substantiating evidence is that the Sejarah Melayu, also known as the Malay Annals, recounts the foundings of a great trading city on the island in 1299 by a ruler from Palembang, Sri Tribuana, also known as Sang-Nila Utama, who named the city Singapura, Lion City, after sighting a strange beast that he took to be a lion. He was pleased with this sighting of the lion as he believed it to be a good omen, a sign of fortune coming his way. And thus, he decided to build a new city for Temasek. He and his men stayed on the island and founded a city in 1324. This strongly suggests that settlements began to develop and more residents came to live here. In 1365, Singapore was caught in the struggle between Siam, now Thailand, and the Java-based Majapahit Empire for control over the Malay Peninsula. The Majapahids claimed the Singapore as its vassal state and demanded tribute from it. Singapore refused and the Majapahids invaded Singapura. It is recorded that some disloyal Singaporeans within the fortification secretly opened the main gates to the invaders. The end of this account of this invasion says that the soil in Fort Canning is red in colour because of the bloodshed by the Singaporeans on the hill during that invasion. According to Sejarah Melayu, Singapore was defeated in one Majapahit attack. Sejarah Melayu as well as contemporaneous Portuguese accounts note the arrival around 1388 of King Parameswara from Palembang, who was fleeing Majapahit control and his hometown Sumatra. Although granted asylum by the ruler of Singapura, the king murdered his host and seized power, establishing himself as the island's overlord, thus proving that Singapura was a kingdom settlement in the 14th century. Within a few years, however, Majapahit or Thai forces again drove out Parameswara, who flew northward to found eventually the great seaport and kingdom of Malacca. This is cross-referenced and corroborated by written records of Chinese trader Wang Dayuan. Moving on to archaeological findings that prove the existence of settlements back in the 13th to 14th century. Archaeologists uncovered remains of ancient 14th century Singapore within the St. Andrew's Cathedral compound, yielding the inference that the ancient settlement extended all the way from the Singapore River to Stamford Road. Chinese coins include those of the Song and Yuan dynasties from the 14th century. Stoneware vessels, along with several porcelain Caledon jarlets, all believed to be of the 14th century, have been recovered. Others include a tubular carnelian bead, probably from India, a Yuan dynasty 10 cash coin from China, a Sri Lankan coin of the 13th century, and a carved stone human head. These could very likely have belonged to residents of past settlements in the 14th century, and I think that this statement strongly suggests that there were many immigrants from all over Asia, and there was already a presence of different ethnic groups living in settlements in the 14th century. Other artifacts approximately dating to the 14th century have been recovered from 10 archaeological sites on Singapore Island, all bound by Fort Canning Hill, telling us of its rich heritage that was already present back in the 14th century. Archaeologists uncovered thousands of glass beads and bangles, exquisite Chinese ceramics, and the remains of gold ornaments. Ceramics encode social information concerning important social distinctions within a society. I believe that these artifacts revealed that an elite class or royal family lived on the hill in the 14th century and gave credence to the legends from Sejarah Melayu that describe a royal palace on the summit. Another archaeological finding is the Singapore Stone. The Singapore Stone contains 50 to 52 lines of script that to this day has not been deciphered or translated. It once stood at the mouth of the Singapore River, but it was blown up by the British in 1834. The inscription is either in Old Javanese or in Sanskrit. It is likely that the person who commissioned the inscription was Sumatran and probably residing in the settlements in Singapore. The stone was most likely erected in the 12th or 13th century. This proves that there was a culture of writing and language back in the 13th century. These artifacts serve to support the hypothesis that they belong to a complex port city with settlements which once existed in the 13th to 14th century, and this claim is further proven after cross-referencing and corroborating of different sources of evidence, Sejarah Melayu, artifacts, and Wang Dayuan's written accounts, and many more.